Okay, let's dive into an explainer of a case known simply as the third picture. Now, what starts off sounding like your typical by-the-numbers true crime mystery is actually about to transform into one of the most profound psychological dramas you've probably ever heard. Seriously, it's going to challenge everything you think you know about missing persons cases. Let's get right into it.
So picture this. It's the dead of night. At exactly 2:05 a.m., Emily Carter wakes up to an empty bed. There is absolutely no sign of her husband, Daniel. Now, at first she figures, maybe he just went downstairs for a glass of water. But after a few minutes go by, she tries calling his phone. It goes straight to voicemail. Totally turned off. She walks outside, and that's when she realizes his car is completely gone from the driveway. Nobody in the family has a clue where he went. So, by 4 a.m., the police are involved, and a massive search is underway.
And the scene the police eventually stumble upon? It is literally impossible. About 30 kilometers outside the city, parked on this completely desolate road, they find Daniel's car. And it is basically a car thief's absolute dream. The doors are left wide open, keys are literally still in the ignition, wallet sitting right there on the front seat, and his bag is in the back. But nothing has been touched. There are absolutely no signs of a struggle, no blood, nothing. The only things actually missing from the scene are Daniel himself and his cell phone. Now, keeping in mind that Daniel was a highly successful construction businessman with no real enemies and literally zero reason to be out on a deserted road, the police immediately jump to the most logical conclusion: kidnapping. But here's where things get weird. As the hours start ticking by in this eerie, absolute silence, the whole kidnapping theory just begins to fall apart. 2 full days pass. Crickets. Nobody demands a ransom. There are no mysterious phone calls in the middle of the night. And Detective James Miller, who's the lead investigator on this, starts to realize, okay, this definitely isn't a standard abduction for money or revenge.
Right, so by day 3, Detective Miller completely pivots his strategy. He decides to start digging through Daniel's totally ordinary room. He's looking past all the mundane stuff, cupboards, family papers, and he finds something just a little out of place. It's this old, unlocked wooden box, and inside that box, 3 photographs that absolutely blow the whole case wide open. Let's take a look at what he actually found in there. Now, the first 2 pictures, totally normal. You've got a vintage shot of Daniel's parents and a picture of Daniel when he was like a 5-year-old kid. But that third picture, that one stopped the detective dead in his tracks. It showed this young man standing in front of an old house. And strangely enough, that house looked exactly like Daniel's current home, right down to the specific tree in the front yard. But the real red flag was that neither Emily nor Daniel's father claimed to know the young guy in the photo. In fact, when Daniel's dad looked at it, he just went totally silent before flatly denying he knew the guy. Detective Miller could instantly tell he was hiding something major. And get this, when Detective Miller flips that third photograph over, he doesn't find a ransom demand or anything like that. He finds this super cryptic, unsigned message written right there on the back. It says, "The day you understand the third picture, you will find Daniel." So it wasn't a ransom note at all. It was a puzzle.
Now, here is where we hit a crucial, literally impossible contradiction. They identify the man in the photo, and it turns out to be Michael Carter, Daniel's uncle. But here's the catch. Official records showed Michael died 22 years ago in this horrific car crash. There was no DNA test done at the time, just a body that was identified by Daniel's father. But based on the timestamp and the details in this photograph, it was taken only 19 years ago, meaning Michael somehow posed for this photo 3 whole years after his own funeral.
So your first thought is probably, okay, well, the photo has to be manipulated, right? To prove it wasn't faked, investigators analyzed the background. They actually matched a tiny, hyper-specific scar on a tree branch in the picture to the physical tree still standing in front of the old house. It was a perfect match, which confirmed beyond a shadow of a doubt that Michael Carter actually stood there in the flesh 3 years after he supposedly died. And the mystery deepens even further once they check the bank archives. Detective Miller uncovers that Daniel's father had been secretly and regularly depositing money into his quote-unquote dead brother's account for years. I mean, why on earth would someone continually send money to a guy who passed away 2 decades ago?
Which brings us to the family secret, a faked death to hide the truth.
So, armed with this literally impossible photograph and those shady bank records, Detective Miller brings Daniel's father back into station. and the elderly man finally just breaks down. He confesses to a staggering 20-year lie. It turns out Daniel was not their biological son at all. He was actually the orphaned child of Michael's close friend who had passed away. Now, Michael knew all about this and desperately wanted to tell Daniel the truth so he'd know his real roots. But the family, who were totally obsessed with protecting their societal honor, suppressed the whole thing. So, when Michael was in that terrible car crash, he actually survived, though with a pretty severely disfigured face. And the family basically seized that opportunity. They used the accident to declare him officially dead and forced him into permanent exile, terrified he would eventually come back and reveal Daniel's true parentage.
Let's lay out the timeline here so we can see how all these pieces finally click into place. You've got year 0, the crash, the fake death, and Michael's banishment. Then, year 3. Michael sneaks back home and leaves the third picture as a sort of silent clue. And then finally, year 22, which is present day. Adult Daniel accidentally stumbles upon Michael's hidden letters, completely shattering his own reality right before he vanishes into thin air. Now that Detective Miller realizes this is a quest for identity and not a kidnapping, he starts following the geographical breadcrumbs. Remember where Daniel's abandoned car was found? Well, just 4 kilometers away from that exact spot, there happened to be an old nursing home. Miller searches it, and he tracks down an elderly man who's been living there for a decade. It's Michael Carter, alive and well. And hanging right there on his wall is that exact same third picture. Michael calmly explains the whole situation to the police and points them toward a remote village where they can finally find Daniel.
So the police rush out to this remote village and boom, there he is. Daniel Carter is just sitting quietly in front of an old house. He's totally safe. But when Detective Miller finally walks up to him after this massive, stressful manhunt, he still has to ask the ultimate question to officially close the case. Was he actually kidnapped?
Daniel just shakes his head. No, he says softly, I disappeared myself. He hadn't been grabbed by business rivals or held for ransom. He orchestrated the whole thing. He hid his tracks simply because he needed to find out whose son he truly was. He just desperately wanted an answer to the fundamental question of his own existence.
And the most fascinating part is that night, the case doesn't end with some dramatic arrest or a bunch of handcuffs. It ends with a phone call. Daniel calls his dad, the man who had literally lied to him his entire life, and delivers just a heartbreaking line. He says, "You hid a lot from me, but one thing was true. You loved me as your own son." It's just an incredible moment that totally flips the script from a rigid criminal procedural into this beautiful, super complex family drama. It's a powerful reminder of how often emotional truth completely overshadows legal truth in our lives.
It really brings home the idea that sometimes people disappear not to run away, but to find their true identity. It leaves us with such a haunting question. What actually makes us who we really are? Is it the stories we're told growing up, or is it the blood in our veins? So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. If you found out your entire life was built on a hidden truth, how far would you go to find your own third picture?